FBI is warning of protests at all 50 state capitals leading up to Inauguration Day next week. It comes as Texas congressional leaders kick off their session today. Our Janelle Ford takes a look at the security measures in place as lawmakers arrive in Austin.
Yeah, this morning as lawmakers arrive at the state capitol, the first thing they'll probably notice is an increased number of DPS troopers on the ground. There is a very real cloud of concern over the 87th Texas legislative session today, and it stems from the FBI investigating those claims that there are planned protests at capitals across the country ahead of the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden next week. We spoke with Texas senators about the security measures in place. They say the threat has the Capitol operating much different than usual. In fact, the safety concerns prompted a handful of lawmakers to send a letter asking Governor Greg Abbott to ban firearms on the opening day of the session. Here in Texas, you're allowed to open carry at the Capitol with a license, but in light of the DC attack, states like Michigan have changed similar firearms rules. We reached out to DPS and asked if the open carry rules would be changing. DPS wouldn't say, but they did send us this statement that reads in part, while we do not discuss operational specifics, DPS will continue to adjust their operations as needed to maintain public order and address potential threats. Lawmakers say they've had security briefings leading up to today.
I would just caution folks that right now we're trying to deal with actually opening up session on day one, let alone the remainder 139 more days that we have left in the session. And so we have to do the people's work.
The FBI says leading up to inauguration, they're doing a full court press to make sure that what happened in D.C. doesn't happen again. Back to you.
Inauguration Day just 8 days away. Janelle Fort, thank you so much. Now let's take a closer look at some of the issues you could expect during this session. There are more than a dozen proposed bills dealing with marijuana. Everything from legalizing the use of marijuana for adults to decriminalizing possession of 2 ounces or less to expanding the use of medical cannabis. The fight over mail-in ballots continues. There's a House bill that would require mail-in ballot applications to be sent only to voters who requested them. Another House bill takes on police reform in wake of George Floyd's death. House Bill 88 makes it easier to sue police. It says officers are not required to apprehend a suspect, but are required to intervene if they see another officer violate use of force rules. House Bill 196 narrows the definition of self-defense, saying preventing a robbery or aggravated robbery is no longer justification for deadly force. Another proposed bill would prevent reality television crews from filming law enforcement while they are in the line of duty. And House Bill 920 takes on compensation for college athletes, saying colleges must allow student athletes to earn money from their name or image and be allowed to have an agent. On the lighter side, House Bill 371 calls for making the day after the Super Bowl a state holiday. House Bill 371. Even if you don't like sports, you can get behind that one. And we're going to continue following the session. We'll bring you any updates on any of those bills we just mentioned. Brandy?
Thanks, Xavier. House Democrats are moving full speed ahead to impeach President Trump for a second time, accusing him of inciting the insurrection at the Capitol. A vote could happen within 36 hours. So today, the House is going to vote on a resolution urging Vice President Mike Pence to convene the cabinet and activate the 25th Amendment, declaring the president incapable of executing his duties. If the VP doesn't respond, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says impeachment proceedings will begin. A vote is already slated on that for Wednesday per House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, and House Democrats say if they move forward, they intend to send their article to the Senate immediately. That means a trial could get underway just as President-elect Biden is taking office. This is far enough along in the process that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell sent a memo to Senate Republicans laying out a timeline for a potential impeachment trial. And can you believe it? It's only been a year since we went through this before, but here's a quick refresher of how the impeachment process works. So lawmakers in the House investigate and draft an article of impeachment. They have already done those first 2 steps. Step 3 comes Wednesday, followed by a vote. And if the House passes the article of impeachment, President Trump will be impeached for an historic second time. The Senate takes over from there with an impeachment trial. Once it concludes, senators vote. And if a majority find the president not guilty, he remains in office. There's no punishment or consequences associated with that. But a guilty majority, he'd be removed from office, Xavier.
All right, Brandy, time now is just about 6:07. We're going to turn to coronavirus now. Here are the things we are tracking for you this Tuesday morning, starting with a grim beginning to the new year. Nearly 30,000 Americans died from COVID-19 in the first 10 days of 2021. Meantime, the city of Houston reported more than 1,400 new cases yesterday, and the positivity rate is sitting at about 17.4%. Also, the hospitalization rate is only getting worse. It's going in the wrong direction. Yesterday, COVID-19 patients took up 21% of our region's hospital beds.
And as those numbers continue to climb, rolling out the vaccine is more important than ever. This week, the state sent doses to 28 vaccination hubs across Texas, including 3 right here in Houston. Governor Abbott hopes these vaccination clinics ramp up numbers quickly. As of right now, the Houston Health Department is not taking any more appointments, and the city wants more supply from the state to open more vaccination sites this weekend. Governor Abbott says Texas is slated to get 600,000 doses each week this month. Meanwhile, in Galveston County, UTMB says it will run out of their first doses by tomorrow. So this is important here. If you have an appointment after today, you will have to reschedule. Meanwhile, the FDA still has not approved the vaccine for teenagers and children under 17 years old. But that could all change. That tops the day's other big stories.
Moderna is opening its trials up to kids 12 to 17, and Houston, one of 20 cities participating. 13-year-old Jack Diamond and his mom Leanne decided to roll up their sleeves for science.
I see it as incredibly patriotic. If we get sick, we're just stressing an already taxed healthcare system.
Over the weekend, we were really just busting at the seams.
Jails too full. Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez says under normal circumstances, the state allows them to house 10,000 inmates. And right now, they have about 9,000, the most since March. That means jail officials can't properly social distance inmates. Today, Harris County Sheriff Sergeant Bruce Watson will be laid to rest. He died in a crash earlier this month. His funeral is at Grace Community Church with public visitation at 9:30 a.m. Cleaning up after an explosion damages the Houston Federation of Teachers building. Houston Fire says it may have been sparked by a gas leak. And the Crimson Tide are back on top. Alabama cruised past Ohio State to win the college football national championship last night. It's the team's 6th title in 12 years. And those are the big stories on this Tuesday morning.
All right, at 6:09, the one thing you need to know, we are starting off cold. And when I say cold, temperatures are at or even below the freezing point. The good news is a good little warming trend is expected over the next couple days. Lots of sunshine in the forecast. I'll show you that coming up in about 5 minutes.
Cheetah, thank you. All right, you've heard us talk about the 25th Amendment, but what about the 14th Amendment? It's another option lawmakers are considering. Cheryl Mercedes connects the dots.
In the wake of the Capitol riots, there has been a lot of talk about impeachment and the 25th Amendment. But those are not the only options on the table. There is also the lesser-known 14th Amendment. Let's connect the dots. Added after the Civil War, the 14th Amendment is best known for granting citizenship to anyone born in the United States and guaranteeing equal protection under the law to all citizens. But under Section 3 of the amendment, it also says public officials can be expelled from office if they engage in insurrection or rebellion against the United States or provide aid or comfort to our enemies. According to historians, it was aimed at keeping former Confederates from holding office. A few Democrats have broached using the 14th Amendment to remove President Trump from office, but the louder calls are for using it against members of Congress who encouraged the protesters. Lawmakers who could be targeted include Representative Mo Brooks of Alabama, who was at a rally in Washington before the riot, and Louis Gohmert of Texas, who suggested supporters take to the streets after his lawsuit to overturn the election failed. Senators Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley have also been mentioned. Whether this actually could happen is another matter.
Political watchers say it may be harder to make a case against Cruz and Hawley because they did not directly call for violence or rebellion, but expect the matter to be discussed by lawmakers in the coming days. Connecting the dots, I'm Cheryl Mercedes for H-Town Rush.